Welcome to Tech Conversations with Grace Chng, a podcast series by News on Tech, which aims to expand business leaders' technical IQ and intelligence in emerging and future technologies. I am Grace Chng, and with me is Tan Teik Guan, founder and CEO of pQCee. Hi, Teik Guan.
Hi, Grace. Thanks for having me here.
You're welcome. Now, Tech Conversations is all about talking to tech experts like yourself to highlight the technologies and trends that will have the potential to create substantial advancements in the future and significantly impact industries, economies, and societies. So in this podcast, Teik Guan, you're now a founder of a Singapore startup, pQCee. Tell us what pQCee is.
Well, pQCee is essentially what we call a deep tech software startup, right? So we use software to solve problems that we see using technology naturally, and looking at what we can first, from a startup standpoint, run as a commercially viable company. But on the other hand, really try to solve some of the exciting problems that we see coming up that we think would definitely benefit society at large. And of course, at the end of it, for me, enjoy the process.
Oh, that's interesting. So you PhD and your topic was quantum computing. Post-quantum cryptography.
Yes, that's right.
So this is what we're going to talk about. I think this is an interesting topic. People are casting their eyes on this future technology.
Sure.
So in the past 12 months, I've written a few stories on quantum computing and quantum-safe networks. But before we dive into this topic of quantum safe and the key factors organizations should think about when preparing for quantum safe networks, I want to start by asking you for a prediction. When will quantum computers arrive?
Well, quantum computers are already here. It's
Right.
just that they are in very, very small sizes.
Right.
And in fact, your regular laptops would outperform many of the quantum computers that are out there.
Okay.
It's just the growth of how that technology is going to evolve to the point that now it will first overtake current computers and then start to become way more powerful and do stuff that we never believed possible.
So I've heard of the number of the year 2030 is when we see the first commercially available quantum computer.
Okay.
Is that a good date?
I put the date between 2031 to 2033.
Okay.
And that is, in fact, how I explain the part of my thesis itself.
Right.
If you just take Moore's law, right,
Yeah.
the one that says it doubles the compute power every 18 months or so, you take what the quantum computer has today and you just multiply it by 2 every 18 months,
Right.
you would get to 2031.
Okay.
So that's
That's
again,
about the time frame that you are talking
back
about.
of the envelope calculation.
Okay. So how do you see the role of quantum safe security evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, then you need to understand that quantum computers, with the good it brings, from the accelerated computation and the ability to handle a lot of data, it unfortunately also breaks some of the assumptions that we in the past have always believed from a cryptographic and cybersecurity standpoint is good.
Right.
What we thought would be secure for millions of years, unfortunately, can be compromised with a powerful enough quantum computer, say 2031, in a matter of hours or days.
Right.
And that essentially then breaks what we are doing. And therefore, this quantum safe network is about fixing or making sure that we don't have that same assumption as we go into the next decade.
So the companies or the enterprises that would be concerned with this would be the ones who are running large networks, telcos, banks.
Well, those are the service providers.
Yeah.
They handle not just their own data, but the data for their customers
Right.
and their partners.
Right.
That's why it starts to get scary, right? Because if they are compromised, it is a systemic attack that, a lot of people will be impacted at one time.
Right.
Versus, say, a SME, which perhaps have less customers, less data, but still equally just as important, because that same data is also going to be vulnerable to a quantum computer.
Right. So how will quantum computers be a threat? So they can, I've read and I've spoken to people who tell me that the bad threat actors can harvest the data now, keep it until a quantum computer comes along, and then use the quantum computer to use the data for malicious activity,
Yep.
or they can break the cryptographic codes, and or they can accelerate brute force attacks. So, what are some of the defense positions that you can take?
Got it. Well, to understand the threat, we must first understand where that vulnerability lies.
Okay.
And quantum computers are able to currently, at least from a mathematical and theoretical proof, break what we call public key cryptography.
Right.
So, cryptography has, we have different branches using different kinds of primitives. The public key cryptography that's used today, using algorithms that you hear like RSA or
Yes.
pQCee,
Yes.
these will be vulnerable to quantum computers. Unfortunately, the underlying mathematical problems that they're based on are what quantum computers can speed up very much on. So we need to look at the applications that rely on this public key cryptography, and as you mentioned, the protection of data, typically in storage as well as in transit. That means when you're communicating, relies a lot on public key cryptography. So how do we then fix this?
Yes.
It's a matter of either using new algorithms that we know are not vulnerable to quantum computers, or have a different way in order to perform this key exchange, which essentially is that function that public key cryptography uses for data. So you mentioned again about quantum safe networks.
Right.
Quantum safe networks is precisely trying to do this, to say, let's not use public key cryptography, let's rely on the physical properties of quantum networks in order
Okay.
to do the key exchange,
Okay.
and therefore not be vulnerable to quantum
Can you
computers.
give an example?
So an example would be, say, zip files, right? So if you're using zip, you can actually have a password to protect that zip.
Yeah.
And so to be very clear, that password protection is what we call asymmetric key encryption. So they translate that password into a secret key that's
Right.
common between two of us.
Yeah.
And then I zip it and encrypt it with this password. You know the same password, and you can then unzip and unlock that same thing.
Right.
So in that sense, if our password is big and long enough,
Right.
actually it's safe from a quantum computer.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So safe and long, we'll come back to this again. But how do I get this password over to you if I'm not going to, if I'm not going to meet you and you are somewhere halfway across the globe? Right. I then rely on public key cryptography to send it to you, and that's where the
danger is.
Yes.
Right.
So if there is a quantum safe network between two of us, and we rely on that in order to get this password agreed on both sides, then we are good.
Yeah, but how do you build that quantum safe network?
So that's where the physical properties come in, right? So one of the solutions for quantum safe network is what they call using a quantum key distribution, or essentially using light photonics, where they can have a pair of correlated photons being sent to both sides, and when we sample the photons on both sides, you are able to then derive a key that's only secret between the two of us. So that's really relying on the photonic properties of light in order for that to happen. And the great thing about it is that if someone is in between trying to listen, this key doesn't get established, and we know that actually there's someone in between. That's really the quantum safe network.
But it cannot happen overnight, right? You need some time to develop these quantum safe networks.
Yes, unfortunately they are, fortunately or unfortunately, right? I mean, they are a new generation of networks, and a lot of research has been put into it. I think the Singapore government has announced last year, and in fact this year, about the National Quantum Safe Network, where they are putting in a sizable investment to build Singapore with the networks in place. So yes, it requires, unfortunately, a sizable amount of money.
And time too.
And time, because we need to start to understand the properties there. We essentially are still relying on the physical properties of light, and therefore the need for materials, the need for protocols, and how we design these have to come into play.
So does it mean that if we have the quantum safe networks, we can say, hey, it's a free world, we are now safe. We don't have to protect ourselves.
Well, we wish, but no. From a cybersecurity standpoint, we like to see data in two areas, right? Data in transit and data at rest.
Yes.
Data in transit can be solved with quantum safe networks.
Right.
That's quite understood. But data at rest is a different thing. Data
Right.
at rest means something I store within my thumb drive, on my laptop and stuff. That is essentially my own data stored by myself using a password that I remember. And a lot of these also use, for example, public key cryptography for that.
Right.
And unfortunately,
The PKI can be broken.
Yes, and quantum safe networks don't come into play here because there's no network.
Okay, so can quantum play in that area?
Well, that's where the research is more into this whole what they call post-quantum cryptography.
Right.
So instead of using physics to solve the problem, we use math to solve the problem.
Oh, okay.
So as we understand more and more about quantum, we understand what are the types of problems that quantum can do for us, that can solve for us.
Yeah.
But we also know what quantum cannot do.
Okay.
And understanding that limitation means that if we choose these kinds of mathematical problems to protect our data, then even an attacker with a powerful enough quantum computer cannot compromise what we're doing.
So this is what you're doing now?
Yes, that's right.
And any light at the end of the tunnel?
Yes. Well, I mean, it's not just me. The whole world is working on it. The National Institute of Standards and Technologies, based in the US, is already coming up with new standards on how they can design algorithms and the mathematical proof behind it of why these are secure against a quantum computer. You should, in fact, they announced that the standards are coming out this summer, so expect to come out within the next
I think they have
months.
a standard that's coming out with IBM.
No, it's not just IBM, it's the whole world.
It's the whole world.
Yeah, so in fact, there are different standards related to confidentiality as well as for the data integrity side of it. So different algorithms and coming out with
Right. We'll come and touch on standards in a little bit, but I want to come back to this quantum safe networks.
Sure.
It sounds that it requires some money, some investment, and time and effort and skills, right? I'm kind of worried for SMEs. They are the backbone of supply chains throughout the world. And soon, I think the big organizations around the global organizations will require their supply chains to certify themselves as quantum safe. But they don't have the money or the resources to do it. How can SMEs become quantum safe?
Well, to be fair, right, we still do not know where this quantum safe network comes in. And if we believe Moore's law happened, right, both while compute power goes more and more powerful in one sense, the prices of compute also drops.
Yes.
So we hope that maybe by 2031, quantum safe networks are just like a commoditized items where hopefully SMEs can also tap onto these.
So you can just buy a service.
Yes, that's one. On my end, I mean that there is a bigger concern that I would bring up to you, which is the harvesting attack that you said, right? That if data is captured today, we're not talking about in 2031, but captured today, and unfortunately decrypted or revealed in 2031, this is still a problem. And it's not just related to large MNCs, even to SMEs. A simple way to do it, and I would go back to my simple example of the zip itself, just use zip to encrypt your data, store it in your laptops or thumb drives, and use a long enough passwords. And in this here, I would say that currently what is seen to be, say, a 8-character password, a simple way to defeat a quantum computer, just make it 16.
Oh, okay.
Just make it 16 characters.
Just double it, okay.
Yeah, double it. And in fact, what happens is that it actually exponentially increases the time needed to break.
To crack it, yeah.
To crack it. And without going too much into the math, I can assure you that a 16-character password chosen randomly is not vulnerable to a quantum computer.
Right, okay. So there are now different standards in the world. You have NIST, you have ITU, you have European standards, all on quantum safe networks. Are they all interoperable?
I wouldn't say that they're interoperable. I think they're very much aware of each other's efforts and research, because ultimately these standards are just one thing. The people that participate and contribute to the standards are actually common. So many of them who contribute to the NIST standards also go to the ITU, also see on IETF, and then many others as well. So the interoperability will probably come in when they start to see how all of these match up. And there are already many interoperability conferences that are being conducted. I would say that we tend to think of standards as just one monolithic kind of thing, but actually it's a lot more complicated than that. There are, again, multiple layers. The NIST guys are doing the most the most basic layer, which is at the algorithm level.
Okay.
And then on top of the algorithms come the protocols, the data formats, and all the other communication stuff. Right. So they all build on each other itself. Are there interoperability challenges? Naturally. We know for a fact that the US guys versus, say, even Germany are probably not seeing 100% eye to eye on what are the algorithms.
Okay.
But there is a push definitely to make sure that there is interoperability in place.
So for an organization that is working on a quantum safe network, how will they know, or how will they know which standard to follow?
I think it is way too early for any, I would say, end user organization to say, let's adopt this standard, let's just go with it. We are still, perhaps, as I said, 5-10 years away. And that 5-10 years means that we literally have almost two IT project life cycles before that actually comes in. Okay. What we have been advocating to many of these business owners, the head of IT departments, to say that get that capability to understand the risks of quantum and your ability to make that decision when it needs to happen. Because if you're going to implement something in 5 years, you're going to have to budget for it in about 3 years' time.
Right.
In 3 years' time, can you get yourself to a point that you can make a budget decision?
So this is what you're hearing from organizations and potential customers.
Yeah, there's no need to say, let's choose a standard today. I think it will change. Unfortunately, technology is tough, and you need, not just one PhD, hundreds of PhD guys putting their heads together to make sure that things work. Yeah. And it's not fair for therefore an organization to be able to make that decision on how to choose a standard. The standards will be there, but for you, it is about making a budget decision on what kind of applications, what kind of timelines you're going to get your people to start working on it.
So you need to start training the people.
Yes.
Right. Putting maybe systems in place.
And running pilots, for example. Okay. So one example that the Monetary Authority of Singapore, pushed out during their circular earlier this year is that they asked the banks, why don't you try doing a pilot? Right. It's not to say that this will become cast in stone and this is the correct solution, but it allows your people, your team members to get their fingers a little wet, trying to do something
to learn.
Right. And that is going to be very valuable when you actually implement the final solution itself.
Okay.
So that would be something I would advocate today, rather than trying to choose between all the different standards that will come out.
So is this where the world is at the moment?
Two things. Yes, that's one thing, where the world is in terms of awareness, in terms of getting that capability. Right. The second is in the asset side of things, understanding where your data assets lie, your applications, because these are the ones that are going to be, impacted when quantum computer comes. So understanding where are your assets. Are they just all in a single location? There are some in the cloud. Yes. What are the types of vulnerable assets? There are those that are time sensitive versus those that it's okay.
Identify your crown jewels.
Precisely. Right. I think that's another area that is starting to get that push from organizations to say, understanding where your assets are, knowing them, and knowing the priority, because you unfortunately are not going to be able to move everything on day one. But your important ones have higher priority. Get them fixed first before the subsequent ones that come in.
Right. Okay. So what are the biggest misconceptions about quantum safe networks and quantum cryptography?
Okay. So it's a point that I have a lot of gripe about, unfortunately. There is a misconception that you need quantum to fight against quantum.
Right.
And yes, quantum safe networks uses physics, which is quantum-based technology, to defend against quantum attacks. But the whole area on post-quantum cryptography, which is math, nothing to do with quantum, but understanding the limits of quantum and therefore using math to make sure that you are not bound by those limits is something that we can also do. It is a solution. There are areas where it can be applied, and therefore it's not true that you need quantum to defend against quantum. There are definitely solutions that don't need that.
Okay, so as a last advice for organizations to give them, what would you say to them, get quantum ready? What would be the one piece of advice?
Wow.
I know you have many pieces, but what is the one piece?
My theory, and I've mentioned it before as well, is unfortunately the very first encounter with quantum that many organizations will face is through the scammers. And in fact, getting yourself prepared and understand a lot more about what quantum cannot do, should not do, is very important, because you don't want the scammers to come in.
The scammers, who are you referring to?
Well, there are many ways. There are many ways to, as with every new technology, because of that knowledge gap, people will come in and tell you different things. Hey, I'm running a fund that is using a quantum computer that will pick the stocks that will make you richer than anything else in the world.
Okay, that's a scam. Okay.
That's a scam, right?
Okay.
There are others. Hey, you have to change your password now because our system got hacked by a quantum computer. Oh my God, there's all
and
these
the list
things.
goes on.
And the list goes on.
Right.
Unfortunately, you need, and these are not new scams. They just have a new reason to scam.
Yes.
I think
Using the same story, but now the technology is different.
Precisely, right. Yeah. I mean, we went through that with COVID. Even with COVID, we had all these scammers come in. And now with quantum computers, we know that they're not going to sit by the side and let this whole technology play out. They would try to figure out how to make money from it.
Yeah.
And it is therefore for the organizations to understand that certain things may or may not be as what people say it to be, and nothing beats really trying to figure it out yourself.
So
right
do
now.
the due diligence.
Yes.
So it's important then to have some in-house expert on quantum, right?
I wouldn't say expert per se, but attending conferences, listening to this kind of podcast definitely is one of them, and build it out through the years. I already know of the universities and even the polytechnics wanting to start this kind of quantum awareness courses, quantum for businesses, and these would give you at least the necessary head start in order to know how to go from here. Right, it's coming in about 5 years' time. It's not the fastest thing in the world, but it's coming. And if your business is going to be at the forefront of this whole technology, then you want to be ready for it. So that's one thing that I would tell a lot of businesses: get the awareness in.
Right. So 2031, 2032 is your prediction for a commercial quantum computer to arrive.
Mm-hmm.
So while that is still 7 years away, we must now prepare ourselves.
Oh, more than that, right? If it's going to happen in 2031, you would expect a lot of regulations start to kick in by 2027, 28.
Right.
I see it as that's the point of what we call the point of inevitability. We no longer can kick the can down the road. We have to do something, and regulations will come in, rules, laws, all that stuff come in. So when that come in, you better be ready by then. So it's not going to be, we're not going to wait until the quantum is at our door before we do something.
Right. So get prepared.
Get prepared.
Right. Thank you very much, Teik Guan, for your insights on quantum safe network.
Thank you.